The roar of motorcycles echoed through the small town of Maplewood as the Hell's Roar biker gang rolled into town, their leather jackets gleaming under the midday sun. The diner at the edge of Main Street buzzed with anticipation, the smell of burgers and fries mingling with the scent of gasoline. Inside, patrons glanced out nervously, knowing well that trouble often rode in with the bikers. Jake Grizzly Thompson, the gang's notorious leader, swaggered through the diner, his presence commanding attention. He had the rugged looks that turned heads, tattoos snaking up his arms, a scruffy beard, and an intensity in his eyes that could freeze anyone in their tracks. But today, there was an edge to his excitement. The gang was here to blow off steam after a long week on the road, and Jake was ready to stir up trouble. "Hey, watch this," he shouted, drawing the attention of his friends and the diner's patrons. He spotted a scruffy stray dog rummaging through trash behind the diner, its fur matted and dirty. With a mischievous glint in his eye, Jake stepped outside, followed closely by a few gang members who were eager for a laugh. "Grizzly, don't," one of them cautioned, but Jake was already striding toward the dog, his heart racing with the thrill of the moment. The dog, sensing the danger, whimpered and darted away, but Jake laughed, a cruel sound that sent shivers down the spines of everyone watching. Without thinking, he kicked the dog lightly, intending it as a joke. "Get out of here, mutt," he shouted, his laughter ringing out. For a moment, the world stood still. The diner's atmosphere shifted from jovial to tense. Patrons gasped, and the dog yelped, darting away into the alley. Suddenly, an elderly man with a weathered face and kind eyes stepped forward, anger flashing in his gaze. "What's wrong with you? That's just a dog. You think kicking him is funny?" Jake scoffed, brushing off the man's words as his friends laughed, egging him on. "Lighten up, old man. It's just a dog. Dogs are for kicking, not for loving." But something shifted in the air. The laughter faded, and a few bystanders began to murmur their discontent. Jake felt a twinge of something, maybe guilt, but he quickly buried it under his bravado. He turned his back to the old man and sauntered back to his gang, the thrill of the moment still surging through him. As the gang resumed their raucous chatter, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that he'd crossed a line. But before he could dwell on it, a familiar face entered the diner. The old man, still glaring, stepped aside to let a figure pass. It was Keanu Reeves, his aura unmistakable even in a casual t-shirt and jeans. The diner's atmosphere shifted again, excitement buzzing as patrons whipped out their phones, eager to capture the moment. Little did Jake know, his actions were about to draw the attention of someone who valued compassion above all else. Jake Grizzly Thompson wasn't always the tough guy everyone feared. Growing up in a rough neighborhood on the outskirts of Maplewood, he learned early on that survival often meant showing no weakness. His childhood home was a ramshackle place filled with chaos, a single mother working 2 jobs, trying to keep food on the table, while his father had vanished without a trace, leaving behind nothing but a bitter void. From a young age, Jake found himself surrounded by trouble. He started hanging out with the wrong crowd, seeking a sense of belonging in a world that felt too big and uncaring. As he grew, so did his defiance. Tattoos became a canvas for his pain, each inked design a symbol of a life he couldn't escape. By the time he was a teenager, he was already entrenched in the biker culture, drawn to the thrill of the open road and the sense of power it provided. Yet, beneath the tough exterior, Jake struggled with feelings of inadequacy. He often remembered his childhood friend, Mia, who had been his anchor. They had grown up together, sharing secrets and dreams. While Mia focused on her studies and nurturing her passion for art, Jake drifted further into the reckless lifestyle of the bikers. She had always encouraged him to make better choices, to rise above the circumstances they had both faced. "Jake, you're better than this," she had told him once, her eyes full of hope. But his heart was hardened by years of disappointment, and he brushed off her words with a smirk. He didn't want to be saved. He wanted to feel invincible. As Jake climbed the ranks in the Hell's Roar, he became known for his bravado and willingness to push boundaries. But beneath the bravado lay a man wrestling with guilt and loneliness. Every time he kicked back with the gang, laughter echoed in the air. Yet a small voice inside him whispered that he was only filling the void with noise. Now, standing outside the diner, he felt a flicker of that voice resurface. The image of the dog, scared and alone, gnawed at him, but he buried it beneath layers of bravado. Who cared about a stray dog? The thrill of being part of the gang was intoxicating. They were a family, even if they were a dysfunctional one. But the weight of the old man's words lingered. As he tried to dismiss it, Jake caught a glimpse of Mia's face in his mind. The way she used to look at him when he made foolish decisions, the disappointment etched in her features. Maybe he was still that kid from the neighborhood, desperately seeking approval, even if it meant putting on a tough facade. His thoughts were interrupted by the raucous laughter of his gang. They beckoned him back inside, and Jake shrugged off the nagging feeling of regret. After all, a biker's life was supposed to be about freedom and fun, not the constraints of guilt. He pushed the door open, rejoining the chaos, eager to lose himself in the moment. Little did he know, that very moment would set off a chain of events that would challenge everything he believed about himself and the world around him. Inside the diner, the atmosphere buzzed with adrenaline and laughter. Jake rejoined his friends at their booth, the clatter of dishes and the hum of conversation enveloping him. The harsh fluorescent lights illuminated their tattoos and leather jackets, casting an almost surreal glow on their revelry. But beneath the surface, an undercurrent of tension simmered. Jake could feel it. Grizzly, you really showed that mutt who's boss. One of the bikers, Vince, hooted, slapping Jake on the back. Laughter erupted, but the sound felt hollow to Jake, a dull echo that failed to resonate within him. He forced a grin, but his mind was elsewhere, replaying the moment when he kicked the dog and the old man's piercing gaze. You should have seen the look on his face. Another gang member chimed in, but Jake felt a gnawing unease. The laughter continued, but it felt more like a facade, a mask he was wearing to hide his discomfort. The doors swung open, and in walked the elderly man, his expression unyielding as he glanced around the diner. Jake's heart sank. The man's presence sent a ripple of silence through the crowd, and the laughter died down as the realization hit. He had come to confront them. Still here, huh? Jake said, trying to sound nonchalant as he leaned back in his seat, crossing his arms. The old man approached their booth, his eyes focused on Jake. You think it's funny to hurt animals? He asked, his voice steady but filled with a quiet fury. That dog didn't do anything to you. Jake's bravado faltered for a moment, but he quickly recovered, sneering. It's just a dog, old man. You need to lighten up. The man stepped closer, and a tense silence fell over the table. That dog is a living being. You think your laughter makes you tough? It just makes you heartless. Jake's friends shifted uneasily in their seats, the mood shifting from carefree to confrontational. The weight of the old man's words hung heavily in the air, igniting a flicker of doubt in Jake's mind. Who did he think he was, challenging the king of the Hell's Roar? Get lost, will ya? Jake spat, his voice rising. You don't know anything about us? But the old man stood firm, undeterred. I may not know you, but I know cruelty when I see it. You have the power to change, to be better. Why choose to be a bully? A flash of anger surged within Jake, but beneath it was an uncomfortable truth. For the first time, he felt exposed, like the bravado he built around himself was crumbling. He glanced at his friends, who were now silent, their eyes darting between Jake and the old man. Leave him alone, old man, Vince finally piped up, trying to diffuse the tension. We're just having a good time. But the old man shook his head. You're all just following his lead, aren't you? Is this really who you want to be? As Jake wrestled with the man's words, a familiar voice broke through the silence. What's going on here? It was Keanu Reeves, the unexpected arrival that everyone had been waiting for. The diner erupted in a frenzy of excitement as patrons rushed to greet him, phones raised high. But Jake felt frozen in place, the moment of confrontation still hanging heavily in the air. Keanu walked over to the booth, his presence calming but commanding. I couldn't help but overhear, he said, his voice low and sincere. What you did to that dog isn't a joke. It's a reflection of who you are. And I think you're better than this. Jake felt the weight of the world on his shoulders, the laughter from moments before now a distant memory. The eyes of the diner were on him, and for the first time, he realized he wasn't just a reckless biker. He was someone who could choose to change. As Keanu's words settled, Jake's bravado began to crack. The laughter that had once filled the diner felt like a cruel joke, and he could no longer ignore the growing conflict within himself. The diner buzzed with excitement, the atmosphere charged with anticipation as Keanu Reeves stood before Jake, his calm demeanor contrasting sharply with the chaos surrounding them. For a moment, everything else faded away. Laughter, chatter, even the clinking of silverware vanished as Jake felt the weight of the celebrity's gaze on him. "What you did to that dog isn't just a joke," Keanu repeated, his voice steady and sincere. "It's a reflection of your choices and who you want to be. It's never too late to change." Jake's heart raced. The thrill of being the tough guy began to dissolve, replaced by an uncomfortable vulnerability. Here was a man admired by millions, speaking directly to him, and for the first time, Jake felt a flicker of something he hadn't experienced in years: self-doubt. The gang members exchanged uneasy glances, unsure how to respond. Vince nudged Jake, trying to inject some bravado back into the situation. "Come on, man, it's just a prank. Don't let him get to you." But the urgency in Vince's voice only deepened Jake's internal conflict. "Maybe it was a prank," Jake muttered, staring at the floor, his mind racing. But was it really funny? The old man, who had been watching the exchange, nodded. "It's a step in the right direction, son. Acknowledging your mistakes is where change begins." Jake looked up, meeting Keanu's gaze again. "Why do you care?" he blurted out, frustration mingling with confusion. "You don't know me." "Maybe not," Keanu replied, his tone still gentle. "But I know what it feels like to be lost and to feel powerless. We all have a choice, and I believe you can choose differently." The words resonated deeply within Jake. They stirred up memories of his childhood, the joy of riding bikes with Mia, the dreams they once shared. Somewhere along the way, he had lost that dream, trading it for a reputation built on fear and bravado. Now, standing before Keanu, he was confronted with the reality of who he had become. "I don't want to be that guy," Jake whispered, more to himself than anyone else. The confession felt like a weight lifted from his shoulders, but the path ahead was still unclear. "Then do something about it," Keanu encouraged, stepping closer. "Start by making amends. The dog you hurt needs your help, and so do others. You can turn this around." Jake's mind raced. Could he really change? Could he do something meaningful instead of merely living for the moment? As he stood there, he felt the eyes of the diner on him. Some were skeptical, others hopeful. The pressure was mounting, but he sensed an opportunity for redemption. The moment stretched on, and finally, Jake nodded, determination sparking in his chest. "I'll do it. I'll help the dog." The words escaped his lips with surprising conviction, and he felt a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. The old man smiled, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "That's a good start." Keanu placed a reassuring hand on Jake's shoulder. "It won't be easy, but you've taken the first step. And remember, it's never too late to change your story." With that, the tension in the diner began to dissipate, replaced by a newfound energy. Jake could feel the shift in the air, a collective sigh of relief that he had embraced the possibility of change. As Jake stepped outside, he spotted the dog lingering near the dumpster, tail between its legs, eyes wide with uncertainty. The sight tugged at his heart, and he realized how he wanted to be seen. A protector, not a bully. "Hey there, buddy," he called softly, crouching down to the dog's level. The animal hesitated, but slowly, cautiously, it approached, sniffing the air as if gauging Jake's intentions. "I'm sorry about earlier. I didn't mean to hurt you." In that moment, the bond of understanding began to form. Jake reached out a hand, palm open, and the dog, sensing his sincerity, took a hesitant step forward. As their eyes met, Jake felt a connection, one of empathy and hope. Suddenly, a motorcycle roared to life in the distance, breaking the spell. The gang was calling for him, eager to get back on the road. But Jake stood firm, taking a deep breath, feeling the weight of his choice settle over him. "I'll catch up in a minute," he shouted, feeling the thrill of a new adventure beckoning him forward, not one of reckless abandon, but of redemption and growth. As he crouched down, the dog nuzzled his hand, and Jake smiled. For the first time in years, he felt like he was on the right path, beginning a journey not just to help the dog, but to find himself again. Jake knelt on the pavement, the stray dog now at his side, cautiously sniffing his outstretched hand. In that moment, he felt a surge of warmth and connection, a flicker of hope igniting within him. The din of the diner faded away as he focused on the animal, his heart racing with the realization that he was finally taking a step toward redemption. "Hey, buddy," he murmured, a smile breaking across his face. "I'm going to take care of you." The dog, sensing the sincerity in Jake's voice, stepped closer, its tail beginning to wag. The bond they were forming felt monumental to Jake, a turning point in a life that had been dominated by bravado and cruelty. But just as he was beginning to feel the exhilaration of change, the sound of revving engines grew louder, and his gang members stormed out of the diner. Vince, leading the charge, spotted Jake on the ground and froze, confusion etched on his face. "What the hell are you doing, Grizzly? Get up. We're leaving." Jake felt a rush of panic wash over him. He glanced at the dog, now looking up at him with trusting eyes. Could he really walk away from this moment? The pull of the gang's expectations clashed violently with the desire to do something meaningful. "Jake, you coming or what?" Vince pressed, impatience creeping into his voice. "We don't have time for this." The old man had followed the gang outside, and now he stepped forward, a sense of urgency in his tone. "Jake, think about what you're doing. This is your chance to change, to show that you're better than the guy who kicked that dog." Keanu emerged from the diner as well, his presence steady and grounding. "You don't have to go with them, Jake. You have a choice right now. This moment defines who you want to be." The weight of their words settled heavily on Jake's shoulders, and for a split second, he felt lost. The laughter of his gang echoed in his ears, a siren call of the life he had always known. But the image of the dog, scared and alone, steadied him. "I'm not going," he said, the words escaping his lips with newfound resolve. The dog wagged its tail, as if sensing Jake's decision. "I need to stay here and help this dog." The gang erupted in laughter, disbelief flickering across their faces. "What? You're ditching us for a mutt?" Vince laughed, but there was a note of concern in his voice. "Yeah, I am," Jake replied, his heart pounding in his chest. "I don't want to be that guy anymore. I want to be someone who helps, not hurts." The old man smiled proudly, while Keanu nodded in approval. "That's it, Jake. You're making the right choice." As Jake stood, the weight of his decision settled over him like a warm blanket. For the first time in a long while, he felt clarity, a sense of purpose that overshadowed the expectations of his old life. He reached for the dog, who now leaned into his side, ready to follow him wherever he led. But Vince stepped forward, anger flickering in his eyes. "You think you can just walk away? You'll regret this, Grizzly. You're making a mistake." Jake took a deep breath, feeling the surge of determination within him. "No, Vince. I'm finally doing something right. You can't make me feel bad for wanting to be better." As the gang began to jeer and mock him, the emotional tension rose. Jake felt the weight of judgment, but it was outweighed by the bond forming with the dog. It was a powerful moment, a decisive stand against a life that had been filled with negativity and bravado. In that instant, everything shifted. The laughter and jeering faded into the background, replaced by the beating of his heart and the soft panting of the dog at his side. He was not just making a choice for himself, but for the dog, for Mia, for the person he wanted to become. Suddenly, the ground beneath him seemed to shift. Jake took a step forward, his gaze unwavering as he faced his gang. "I won't let you pull me back into that life. This is my moment of change." Vince scoffed, but the look on his face betrayed a hint of confusion. The gang had always been a source of power for Jake, but now he realized they were also a chain that had bound him to his past. The dog nudged against Jake's leg, a gentle reminder of the love and companionship he was seeking. Jake knelt down, scratching behind the dog's ears. "We're in this together now, huh?" he whispered, his heart swelling with a sense of purpose. As the gang continued to jeer, a silence fell around them, an understanding of sorts. Jake stood tall, knowing he was ready to face whatever came next. This was more than just a moment. It was the beginning of a journey toward redemption, compassion, and healing. In that moment, Jake finally felt free. With his decision made, Jake felt an incredible lightness wash over him as he stood alongside the dog. The laughter from the gang faded into a distant echo, replaced by the newfound sense of purpose that surged through him. He took a deep breath, grounding himself in this moment of clarity. "Let's go," he said softly to the dog, who wagged its tail in response, as if it understood the significance of the moment. They walked away from the diner, leaving behind the laughter and jeers of the gang. For the first time, Jake didn't feel the weight of their expectations bearing down on him. Instead, he felt liberated, free to be himself. As they stepped onto the sidewalk, the old man approached them, a proud smile lighting up his weathered face. "You made the right choice, son. That takes real courage." "Thanks," Jake replied, feeling the sincerity behind the man's words. "I didn't think I had it in me." Keanu joined them, his demeanor calm and encouraging. "It's easy to stay in a comfort zone, even when it's toxic. But you chose to step out of it, Jake. That's the first step toward becoming who you truly are." Jake nodded, glancing down at the dog by his side. "I want to make things right, for him and for myself." The dog looked up at him, eyes bright with trust. Jake felt a surge of emotion, a mix of determination and gratitude. "I'll take care of you," he promised, stroking the dog's fur gently. "We're going to figure this out together." The old man chuckled softly. "You're going to be a great friend to him. Just remember, it's not always easy to change. There will be challenges ahead." Jake squared his shoulders, determination flooding through him. "I'm ready. I want to do this." With that, the three of them, Jake, the old man, and the dog, set off down the street. The sun shone brightly, casting a warm glow on their path as they walked together. Each step felt lighter than the last, and Jake couldn't shake the feeling that he was finally on the right track. As they strolled, the old man shared stories of his own life, of struggles and victories, moments of heartbreak, and the joy of finding purpose. Jake listened intently, absorbing the wisdom in the man's words. It dawned on him that change was a journey, not just a destination. "Sometimes, the hardest battles are the ones we fight within ourselves," the old man said. "But those are the ones that shape us into who we're meant to be." Jake reflected on this, thinking back to his reckless past, the laughter that had once filled his life with emptiness. He felt a sense of pride swelling in his chest. He was no longer that heartless biker. He was Jake, a man on a mission to make a difference. As they approached a small park, Jake's heart raced with anticipation. He wanted to give the dog a proper name, something that represented their new bond. "How about Buddy?" he said, looking down at the dog. "You'll always be my buddy." The dog barked as if in agreement, and Jake couldn't help but laugh. It felt like a celebration, a newfound companionship forged in understanding. After a few moments of playtime in the park, they sat on a bench, the sun dipping low in the sky. "I know it's just the beginning," Jake said, "but I feel different already." "You are different," Keanu replied, his eyes sparkling with encouragement. "You've chosen to embrace change, and that's a powerful decision. Just remember, there will be challenges ahead, but you have the strength to face them." Jake smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude. "Thanks for believing in me. I didn't think I could change." "You can," the old man interjected, "but it's up to you to keep moving forward, one step at a time." As they sat in comfortable silence, Jake realized that he had not only found a new purpose but also a community. The journey ahead wouldn't always be easy, but he was ready to face it. The memories of his past would always linger, but they would no longer define him. He glanced at Buddy, who was now resting his head on Jake's knee, content and trusting. "We're going to make a great team, aren't we?" he murmured. The dog wagged its tail again, and in that moment, Jake felt a sense of peace enveloping him. He was ready to turn the page and write a new chapter of his life, one filled with kindness, friendship, and the promise of a brighter future. With Keanu and the old man by his side, Jake felt empowered to embrace this journey of self-discovery. He knew it wouldn't always be easy, but he also knew he wouldn't have to face it alone. As the sun set on the horizon, Jake smiled, ready to take on whatever came next. In the days that followed, Jake embraced his new life with Buddy at his side. The bond between them deepened, filled with moments of laughter, adventure, and the occasional challenge. Each morning began with a walk through the park, where Jake found solace in the routine. He marveled at how much joy a simple act of kindness could bring, both to him and to Buddy. As he explored this new lifestyle, Jake found himself reflecting on his past decisions, the friendships he'd nurtured, and the ones he'd let slip away. Each day presented a choice, to succumb to old habits or to forge a new path. With Buddy as his constant companion, he chose the latter. One afternoon, while sitting on a park bench, Jake noticed a group of kids playing with a soccer ball. He watched as they laughed and chased each other, a wave of nostalgia washing over him. Memories of running around with Mia flooded his mind, and he felt a pang of longing for that simpler time. "Hey, Buddy," he said, scratching behind the dog's ears. "Want to join in?" With a newfound enthusiasm, Jake approached the kids, who paused their game to stare at him, unsure of what to expect. "Mind if I join?" he asked, trying to keep his voice friendly. One of the older kids shrugged, tossing the ball toward Jake. "Sure, why not?" As the game began, Jake felt a surge of energy. The laughter of the children echoed in the air, and for the first time in years, he felt alive. Buddy dashed around, barking happily as he chased the ball, bringing smiles to everyone's faces. The kids were initially cautious, unsure about the leather-clad biker, but as they played, they began to warm up to him. Jake couldn't help but chuckle at their joy, and he felt a shift within himself, a release from the burdens of his past. "Nice kick, mister," a little girl shouted, and for the first time, Jake realized that he was no longer seen as a bully. He was just Jake, a guy enjoying the moment with his new friends. After the game, the kids gathered around him, their curiosity piqued. "Is that your dog?" one of them asked, pointing at Buddy, who was panting happily. "Yep. His name is Buddy, and he's the best," Jake replied, smiling at the dog. The children laughed as Buddy leaned in for scratches, his tail wagging furiously. "Can we pet him?" another kid asked, eyes wide with excitement. "Of course," Jake said, watching as they crouched down to give Buddy the attention he craved. In that moment, he realized how far he had come. He was no longer the heartless biker kicking a dog for laughs. He was a friend, a protector, and a role model. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the park, Jake felt a sense of belonging wash over him. He exchanged stories with the kids, sharing laughs and making memories. It was an experience he never thought he would have, and it filled him with a sense of purpose. After they wrapped up, one of the kids asked, "Are you going to come back and play again?" Jake's heart swelled. "Absolutely. I'll be here every week. You guys are awesome." The kids waved goodbye as they ran off, and Jake watched them go, a smile plastered across his face. He turned to Buddy, who was panting happily at his side. "You know, I think we just made some new friends." Buddy barked, as if in agreement, and Jake felt a rush of warmth. His heart felt lighter, the shadows of his past fading with each step he took toward this new life. As the days turned into weeks, Jake continued to make strides. He volunteered at the local animal shelter, helping to care for dogs just like Buddy. With each act of kindness, he discovered a part of himself he thought he had lost, a desire to help and to connect with others. One day at the shelter, while cleaning kennels, Jake met a woman named Sarah. She was passionate about animal rescue, and her enthusiasm was contagious. They struck up a conversation, bonding over their shared love for dogs and the desire to make a difference. "Why did you decide to volunteer?" she asked, curiosity evident in her eyes. Jake hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to share his story. But then, as he glanced at Buddy, who was wagging his tail and looking content, he opened up. "I used to be a different person. I made some bad choices, but then I kicked a dog for laughs, and it changed everything. I realized I wanted to be better." Sarah listened intently, nodding as he spoke. We all have a past, Jake. What matters is that you're here now, making a difference. Her words resonated deeply with him. As he worked alongside Sarah, they formed a friendship built on shared values and a desire to create positive change. Jake felt a connection blossoming, one that encouraged him to continue growing. One evening, as they sat together on the shelter's porch after a long day of volunteering, Jake looked out at the sunset, the sky ablaze with color. I never thought I could feel this way again, he admitted, a sense of gratitude washing over him. What do you mean? Sarah asked, intrigued. Joy, he replied. It feels good to be doing something meaningful. I've finally let go of the past, and I'm excited about the future. Sarah smiled, her eyes sparkling in the fading light. You've come a long way, Jake. It's inspiring to see how much you've transformed. In that moment, Jake realized that he was no longer defined by his mistakes. He had chosen to embrace a new path, one filled with compassion, friendship, and the courage to stand up for what was right. As they watched the sun dip below the horizon, Jake felt a profound sense of peace. He was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that with Buddy by his side and new friends to support him, he could continue to grow and change for the better. As the weeks turned into months, Jake's life transformed in ways he had never imagined. The bond between him and Buddy deepened every day, and their adventures became a source of joy and laughter. Jake felt lighter, liberated from the chains of his past, and embraced his role as a protector not only for Buddy but for others in the community as well. The local animal shelter had become a second home for Jake. With Sarah by his side, they organized events to raise awareness about animal adoption, encouraging others to make a difference. The shelter buzzed with activity, and Jake reveled in the sense of purpose it provided. One day, as they prepared for an adoption fair, Sarah turned to Jake, her expression thoughtful. You know, Jake, I think we should start a community program to help kids learn about responsibility through caring for animals. It could change lives. Jake's eyes lit up with excitement. That's a brilliant idea. We could teach them about empathy and kindness while also finding homes for the animals. Inspired by the thought, they began to plan the program, reaching out to schools and community centers. The response was overwhelming. Parents and teachers were eager to get involved, seeing the potential impact it could have on the children's lives. As the program took shape, Jake found himself reflecting on how far he had come. He thought back to the heartless biker who once kicked a dog for laughs, a shadow of a person defined by anger and bravado. Now, he was leading a movement for kindness and compassion. The day of the adoption fair arrived, and the park was filled with families, laughter, and the sounds of barking dogs. Jake stood at the entrance, a smile plastered on his face as he welcomed everyone. He spotted Sarah nearby, setting up a booth with colorful flyers about their new program. Hey, you, she called, waving him over. Ready to change some lives? Always, Jake replied, his heart racing with excitement. As the day unfolded, children laughed and played with the animals, learning about their care and needs. Jake moved among the families, sharing his own story of transformation. He watched as kids connected with the animals, their faces lighting up with joy and curiosity. Can I pet this one? A young girl asked, her eyes wide with wonder. Absolutely, Jake replied, kneeling beside her. That's Bella. She loves belly rubs. As the girl giggled, Jake felt a swell of pride. He was witnessing the change he had hoped for. Kids learning compassion, responsibility, and the importance of kindness. Later in the day, as the sun began to set, a small family approached Jake, their eyes filled with hope. We heard about the program and wanted to adopt a dog, the father said, his voice filled with sincerity. Jake's heart soared. That's amazing. We have plenty of wonderful dogs looking for homes. Let me show you around. As he led them through the shelter, Jake felt a sense of fulfillment. Each adoption represented a new beginning, not only for the animals, but for the families who chose to open their hearts. After several successful adoptions, the family he had spoken to earlier returned, a small golden retriever puppy in their arms. We want to name her Hope, the little girl beamed. Because she gives us hope. Jake felt tears prick at his eyes. That's a beautiful name. She's going to bring you so much joy. As the fair concluded, Jake stood with Sarah, watching the families leave with their new furry companions. The park was alive with happiness, and Jake realized that he was part of something much bigger than himself. "Look at all this," Sarah said, her voice filled with awe. "You've helped create a community of kindness." "It's amazing," Jake replied, taking a deep breath. "I never thought I could have such an impact, but it feels good to be part of something meaningful." Just then, Keanu appeared, his calm presence a reassuring anchor. "I heard about the event. It looks incredible, Jake." "Thanks, man," Jake said, his smile wide. "I couldn't have done it without Sarah and the support from the community." Keanu nodded, his eyes twinkling with approval. "You've become a role model for so many. It takes courage to change, and you've shown that it's possible." Jake felt a warmth spread through him at the acknowledgement. He had transformed from a heartless biker into someone who could inspire others. The weight of his past had lifted, replaced by a new sense of purpose. As the sun set, casting a golden hue over the park, Jake took a moment to reflect. He was no longer defined by his mistakes, but by the choices he made every day to be better. With Buddy by his side, Jake turned to Sarah. "Let's keep pushing forward. There's so much more we can do." "Absolutely," she replied, determination shining in her eyes. "Together, we can change lives." As they walked home, Jake felt a sense of peace wash over him. He was finally at home in his own skin, ready to embrace whatever the future held. He glanced down at Buddy, who wagged his tail in agreement. "We've got a lot of adventures ahead of you, Buddy." And as they strolled through the park, Jake knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with kindness, love, and the courage to make a difference.